California Dream for All Shared Appreciation Program. This thing is a beast of a loan program, and because it's CalHFA, it's going to get a lot of marketing from the news, from big websites, because of how old this is. Probably the oldest, state-funded program. And there are some more localized programs. You might want to go ahead and just search your county that you service, and your county and DPA loans, down payment assistance, and you'll probably be able to get a list of local county funded loan programs. Now, I know in Orange County, there's a program very similar to this, specific to where you buy is part of that. And over the weekend, I looked up, and where I'm based, where Rise is really based in San Diego County, I found another one that is very similar to this program. And here's the thing about that for me that makes this an incredible purchase. And I had 5 people pre-approved for this program, but part of the selection was you had to have a purchase contract. So I had 5 people pre-approved. Only one of those groups of families was able to secure a property, and they did end up using this program and got it closed, or living in their new house probably for almost a year now. And the most amazing thing is they bought a house essentially worth about $100,000 more than they could actually afford without this program. So it's not, what's great about this is it's not just down payment assistance, and you're basing it off of what you could afford, and you might get a benefit of a small savings, or because you're going to get $9,000, $15,000, $18,000. That person, they got $100,000, and we used 3.5% of that for the down payment. Or I'm sorry, we covered their closing costs, which was, I want to say that was under 20,000, maybe right around 20, and the other 80,000 went towards the down payment. So they did close with a small amount of mortgage insurance, because they were just shy of that 20% threshold, but that's going to drop off for them in a year or two. But what's amazing about it is they purchased a home $100,000 more than they could legitimately qualify for, with zero out-of-pocket expense. It's amazing opportunity. They rushed, they worked really hard to ensure they could get into contract and get that program. So we'll go into this a little bit. This is year 2. There is in my opinion, 2 major changes that are, in my opinion, they're kind of cool. So the shared appreciation program, the summary of this is the Dream for All shared appreciation loan may only be used with a Dream for All conventional first. That's actually a good thing. Providing first-time home buyers with up to 20% of the home's purchase price to be used for down payment and closing costs. So 20% of the purchase price, and the ability to use it for not just down payment, but also closing costs, which, if you, especially some of you guys that have worked with me, we've qualified a bunch of people on down payment programs, but very few, if any, at certain times of the year ever had also the money for closing costs. The client, the potential buyer hears down payment assistance, and they think that's all they need, because we don't really talk about closing costs until you're in the middle of actually trying to buy. So they would come and they just had no savings. And these loans aren't cheap, but you are getting free money. The thing that makes this, again, for me, is most powerful is the amount of the percentage, that up to 20%, and you don't have to use that all if you don't want to, but it's well worth it in my opinion. So who can offer this? You have to be a CalHFA approved lender, which we are. We work through, actually, we have, I want to say 5 or 6 different lenders that we work with that allow us to access this program. Eligible buyer, wow, excuse me, eligible buyers. This is orange because it's a little bit unique. So they tag here, this program is for first-time home buyers. We're going to talk about that in just a minute. And it has to be for an owner-occupied purchase. All right. So eligible borrowers. Wow, we're going to stop. Let's stop saying that. Hey, Travis, just update real quick. Has anybody mentioned, how many answers do you got so far to my question?
We've got 2. We've got one is no showing, and we have another, no one wants to get out of the house.
Nope.
No one wants to drive, get out of the house.
Those are valid reasons, but that is not the big one that causes me personally to hunker down and fear answering my phone. So think about that. So the question, if you weren't on at first, is why do real estate agents hate when it rains? Especially, and I'll throw in another hit, when it rains hard. And for me, I hate it. It's not as bad now because I don't work with clients the same way I used to, but it bothers me still when I think about it. All right, so eligibility for this is one of the big things that has changed from last year to this year. Now, last year, they ran out of funds in 9 business days. These 2 changes that they've made, I think, will extend this money maybe a few days. Because they're doing things a little bit different, you're going to be able to sort of pre-register in a way and be prepared. So we'll talk about that. All right. So the biggest thing is first-time home buyer, but as you can see, this is an orange. At least one of these borrowers must be a first-generation home buyer. Have any of you guys ever heard that term used before in this? This is actually the first time I have, when they start talking about. And then they must be a current California resident, which just means you're renting here. You have a phone bill or something that is being sent to a California address. That's easily verified. You could have a driver's license, your car insurance or registration is California, and that's it. Pretty easy. Typical requirement is, man, I can't talk today at all. So we're going to do this in 2 languages, English and then whatever else I'm saying. But typical requirement for a down payment assistance is homeowner education. The best thing to do is, if you have borrowers that are serious about this, as soon as they register, they should probably start looking at taking this class. It's 40 minutes online. It's not a big deal. It's really just a follow along. It's not a big test at the end. They just got to get through it. And it's helpful information. All right. So first-time home buyer definition. First-time home buyer is defined as a borrower who has not had ownership interest in any principal resident in a home owned by a spouse during the past 3 years. So a current borrower has not been on title, and their spouse, if married, has not been on title in 3 years. That's important information, but it's almost irrelevant to this definition of, and the second requirement is this first generation home buyer. To qualify to be for this shared appreciation loan, we have to be a first generation home buyer. What is that? Here we go. A first generation home buyer is defined as a home buyer who has not been on title, held ownership interest, been named on a mortgage for or owned land in the United States in the last 7 years. So the whole first time buyer, 3 year, whatever, is irrelevant. in this scenario, they have to be first generation home buyers. Now that's step one. Here's the big one though. To the best of the home buyer's knowledge, their parents or biological or adoptive do not have any present current homeowner interest in the United States, or even if they're deceased, they do not have ownership at the time of death in the United States. So this statement is saying that they want this CalHFA, this $250 million, to go to buyers that have never owned a home, and potentially their parents have never owned a home. Immediately when I read this, I shot out to two of my lenders. How are they going to verify this? And we don't know yet. When I do know, I'll give you an update. But it's probably pretty easy to track by, the underwriter at CalHFA will do some type of property search under the parents' legal names, which will need to be submitted at time of registration. All right, here's another cool thing about this, and I appreciate where they're going with this. This first generation borrower requirement also adds an individual who has at any time been placed in foster care or institutional care, as in a care for a large group children's place, like a foster care facility, or been in foster care, as they grew up. So this is super cool. Travis is very familiar with this. They foster kids for the last 10 years, I think, or longer. So makes it very cool that they're adding this piece into it as an addition. So by being a foster child, you automatically, the way I read this is you automatically qualify. Except probably unless it bounced back to you have been a foster child, but you've owned in the last 3 years, that would probably disqualify you. But this is super cool for that reason. All right. So occupancy for these is always owner occupied. Property requirements, these are going to be typical, any type of thing. We're talking about 100% loan, a 5% down, a FHA. We're talking about property requirements that are going to be, a little bit stricter on health and safety, because they realize that this borrower is putting all their money towards this mortgage payment now, and they need to move in immediately. So they're not going to want you or allow you to buy a house that also needs repairs after closing. So this is pretty typical. It's nothing I would worry about. The appraisers are the same appraisers that are appraising all the other properties in the area. They're just going to want it to be, meet health and safety requirements, which is pretty typical. All right. So the term of the program, so the length of this loan is not going to exceed 30 years. And the appreciation loan as well is going to be, that same 30 years. Now, repayment of principal and the shared appreciation loan have to happen at these points in time. These are key points in time. If transfer of the property is, if title is transferred to someone else, if you sell the property, if you pay off the first mortgage loan, so the large loan that you're making your mortgage payment, paying off the subordinate loan principal balance. So if you've chosen to pay off the second, you're going to also have to pay the appreciation at that point, which could be a good thing, because if you pay that off first, you're going to pay appreciation based on the day that you pay that off. If you refinance the first loan, and there is a special option that will allow a one-time refinance and a resubordination of the loan, keeping the program intact as it was when we closed the original sale or purchase. The formal filing records of a notice of default. So if you've not been making your mortgage payment and they file a notice of default, both loans will come due. So that'll be the the main mortgage, the silent second, and the 20% appreciation. All right. This is in red because this is a popular topic right now. These loans, and I'm comfortable saying without doing any research that 100% of down payment assistance loans are not assumable. I'm just going to go ahead and say that. If you can prove me wrong, I'd appreciate it. Just let me know the exact program. But I would bet that 100% of them are not assumable. All right. So let's talk about a little bit about the shared appreciation, which is probably a little bit unique. We got any other good answers on that question?
There's a few coming in, and then there's a few on the loan, but why don't you
We'll hit the
answer
loan
those
one.
in
What?
the
Yep. All right. So
afterwards?
let's
Yep.
give me the loan ones right now, just in case. So before we'll go into a little bit more. That way we're staying close to the probably what.
Income requirements
Yes, we're gonna
and
go over that.
yep, credit score
Credit score is gonna
and
be. We'll go over that in a minute. It's almost there.
does it require one of the home buyers who is first generation to meet all three of those requirements? I believe that's going to be a no. I think it's one of the three. First foster child and first, the list of three that you had right there.
Yeah. So if we go back up here, I think it does not. It definitely does not say. Oh, here you go. At least one borrower must meet these three requirements. So the way that the way that that is reading, I would think that it's actually written weird. So if well, I can see it. So
That's
if
a
you got
good
two
question,
bars, you got a
actually,
husband
now
and
that I
wife.
reread this. Yeah.
No, it makes sense. So you got a husband and wife. What they want is one of those two people needs to be both of them have to be first-time home buyers. But they want at least one of the two to be a first generation home buyer, which means one of the husband or wife's parents haven't owned property ever before. So and I think that's actually probably more fair because if it was both, it would be pretty difficult. I mean, you have no idea how many people, like now when you're trying to go now you're trying to do this, you're limit one buyer based on two different criteria, so it makes sense that it's just one of the two buyers that has to meet the first generation home buyer status. So great question. All right. So let's see. We've done this. Let's go down here. Boom, boom, boom. The term, the reasons that this would come due. Program appreciate. All right. So we talked a little, there was a question about interest rate or interest, which we haven't, or I'm sorry, FICO, which we haven't hit yet. But let's talk about the income requirements. Borrowers with incomes. So this is first time home buyer, but now we're looking at the AMI, area medium income, if you guys are familiar with that. Borrowers with incomes of above 80% AMI and less or equal to the CalHFA loan inputs can qualify for the shared appreciation program and take up to 20% of the purchase price. Here's the kicker. If you're above the 80%, you're also going to pay back the 20%. We scroll down here just a little bit. Borrowers with income less than the 80% AMI, so we're using the same AMI number, and the AMI is based on where the property is, where they're buying at. They can take up to 20% just like the higher income borrowers. However, they only have to pay 15% of shared appreciation back. That's a huge benefit targeting a lower income borrower. Great program guidelines right here for me. I think this is super cool. California is still making a lot of money on this program because home values are going up, but they are definitely saving. I mean, in the situation where a over 80 and under 80% AMI borrower, they live next door to each other, both of their houses go up $100,000 in appreciation over a 5 or 6 year period, the lower income family only has to pay back 15% versus the higher income family paying back 20% of that appreciation, that equity that was built. So saves a lower income family a lot of money in that scenario. It's a great program, in my opinion. Here's a scary thing. The amount of shared appreciation is capped at 2.5 times the original principal amount. Okay, so here's the example. I just said if we used 100 grand, as equity, now we're talking about 20% of the purchase price. So we're going to keep it simple, $500,000 purchase. You're taking $100,000, 20% as your shared equity dollars. The most that you would ever have to pay back is 2.5% of that $100,000. That's $250,000. That's scary. You're like, hey, Mr. Down Payment Assistance, low income borrower, this is a great program, but you might have to pay back $250,000, or at least that's the max. So we know that. However, if that borrower, if in my opinion, I'd be happy to pay that back, because for your borrower to have to pay $250,000, their property went up in value over $1 million of the purchase price, because that can only be 20%. So that's 1.25 million it would be the amount of equity profit that would have to happen before your borrower would pay $250,000. That's a problem I'd like to have, and So again, it sounds a little scary, but it's irrelevant. I don't think a property would go up in value $1 million, $1.25 million, even if you went to term at 30 years. It'd be pretty close. I mean, you might see in 30 years, you generally see a property, go up 100%, maybe 150. For my personal house, my wife bought this house 20 years ago. We're about 250% of what her purchase price was. And when I met her, she was upside down, which is interesting. But we're back to that. So again, this is capped at 2.5% above the amount of money that you borrowed. But if you did have to pay that back, you made a lot of money in equity. So it's a good problem to have, in my opinion. Scroll down here. We're going to do another example of this is kind of how the shared equity program works. So you got your purchase price of $500,000. You're taking 20% for the shared equity part of this loan. That equals $100,000. At the time of sale or refinance, the new value of this property is $700,000. So the owner has $200,000 in equity growth. They owe, but 20% of that, just the 200, they owe in shared appreciation, which right here shows as $40,000. So now in this scenario, let's say they sold the property, bought it for $500,000, took out the $100,000 shared equity. They've been making payments for 5 or 7 years on a loan based on $400,000, saving them tons of money. They now sell it for $700,000. Like any type of mortgage on a property, when you sell it, you pay off all the loans. So out of $700,000, they're going to pay back whatever's left of the first mortgage, 400 grand. Let's say it's 350. Okay. After 7 years, it might be down to 350. They're going to pay back the whole $100,000 of shared equity. So now they're paying 450 back out of the 7, because that $100,000 was essentially borrowed and then set on a shelf, not to be touched until a sale or a refinance. So it's just sitting up there. So you have that whole 100. So you're going to pay 350 back out of the remainder of the original, plus the 100, plus the 40,000. So we go 350, 450, 490. You're going to pay back 490,000 and walk away with $210,000 of equity on a property that you bought 5 or 7 years ago. That to me is an amazing opportunity. Mathematically, I don't think there's another program that I've seen better. And the main reason that this is the best is because it's a silent second, and it's a large silent second. Not just taking $100,000 out of a $500,000 purchase is amazing, because now you're working on a $400,000 loan, 415, which changes the mortgage payment by $500 to $700 a month. So your borrower that's able to use this is saving monthly. They're living in a house that they probably couldn't afford on their own, and that money's not going to be paid back until they decide to refinance or sell. And of that appreciation, of all the appreciation they get, they're keeping 80% of it. So again, I just think this is an amazing opportunity. Second example, at 400. So this is under the AMI. Look at this. So 400, they're going to take 28% again, which is $80,000. The sale price of the house after a few years is $600,000 now. So same thing, 200,000, 20%. But that's what they have to pay. So, or that's what they earned, essentially 20%, 200 grand in appreciation, 20% of less of the sale price. So that equals a 40%. All right, so this is how they're breaking that down. So I see, I would have removed this step just because I do this math all the time. But essentially they made it simple. They're showing both examples. So above the AMI, you would take the 200 grand profit times the 20% that you borrowed, getting the 40 grand, and you would pay back the whole 40 grand. But you're still doing the same thing. You borrowed the 80 grand, which is the 20%. So you're getting that. They're taking the 20% out of the 200, which equals the 40. But the program, because you're under that 80% AMI, you're only having to pay back 75% of the appreciation of the shared equity, meaning you actually only pay back 30,000 instead of 40, like the higher income per earner. So perfect example. I would have done this a little bit different, but it's probably more clear this way. I just needed to read it. But again, this makes it even better. It's an incredible program. Couple of things about underwriting with this. These do absolutely need to be 45-day escrows, and it's almost a let's call it a 4-process underwriting step. So we do an application, they get pre-approved, we take that pre-approval, send it to whichever lender we want. The lender underwrites it as they normally would any type of conventional loan. At that point, once they qualify from the lender sends that off to CalHFA. CalHFA now looks at the loan for the first mortgage and confirms that everything about that loan and everything about the borrower allows them to qualify to get the 20% CalHFA silent second. And then it comes back with whichever conditions CalHFA might ask or the underwriter, and we work on those conditions. We get to the next step, which would be at final close. In that period of time, we're trying to get all those conditions. We get those conditions taken care of. We send them back to our lender. Our lender confirms that we've got all that. They have to now send that back to CalHFA so they can see that everything requested has been submitted and we have a full file. So it legitimately is probably a 45-day close. And you have to realize that this is going to be an exciting program. Like I said, 9 days, they spent $250 million, and that's going to happen again. So a lot was happening at CalHFA in a 9-day period. And my loan, CalHFA was a day, on the second check, they were a day early finishing. On the first check there, I think they were 3 days early. So it was pretty fast, and it's a little, me as a lender, it is a little bit weird because once it goes to CalHFA, it's in no man's land. There's no reaching out to anybody. It's just gone until it comes back. And
We're like literally
yeah.
flying blind for like a couple days while it's over there.
Yes.
Yeah.
So knowing that timeline is like, hey, when's it? It's 5 days. All right. So now I'm like, okay, they got 5 days. I gotta go find something to stay busy for the next 5 days while I worry about
Yeah.
this. Okay. So any other questions on the loan?
Just credit score, and then we should probably roll into our other stuff because we're getting a little
All right.
late.
So credit score is actually minimum credit score is right here. Follow Dream for All conventional guidelines. I am not positive what that is, but I believe it's 600. I will confirm at some point. 600. Okay. Find any other question, any other answers to my question?
No, you have a few things in the chat if you want to grab those on your way
Okay.
out, and then
All right. So the answer to my question and what I believe when I say this, you guys are all gonna probably agree. My biggest fear for the last since 2006 when I first got my real estate license. When I sit here at home and deal with rain like this and my phone rings, I am freaked out that it's a recent home buyer that I worked with calling to tell me that their roof is leaking. The scariest thing ever. Like, not our fault at all, but they don't know who else to call. And they're
yeah,
like, oh my God, I've never owned a house. I've never had a roof leak before. Call my realtor. I got to start blaming people because this sounds like it's probably going to be expensive. If you guys think I'm way off, let me know. But that's my biggest fear all the time. I always joke about it because it's freaking me out, man. And I've never had it happen, but man, I always think about it.
yeah. All right, cool. That was some good info. And again, it looks like they've really narrowed it down to who's going to be able to qualify for this program. I imagine that if you're doing any sort of advertising with this, or if you have any inquiries on this, that a large chunk of the inquiries that you get are not going to qualify for this program this time around. However, use this as a tool to generate leads, because just because they don't fit into this program doesn't mean there aren't others. There are cities out there that are running very similar programs that don't have some of these real niche requirements that they tacked onto this one this time around. There's other down payment assistance programs as well. They're not quite as good as, getting 20%,
Yep,
free money up front, I guess, if you want to say that. So,
for
don't
sure.
write those people off. It doesn't mean they're not going to qualify. Let's vet them all, and use this as a tool to, talk about loans and home buying and things like that. So,
So one last thing that I want to mention on this program. So for the qualifying, and when I talked about, I said there's a way that we can prepare. They are doing this by lottery. So we can pre-qualify a borrower, make sure they meet all these kind of first-time homebuyer requests. They'll be able to submit an application, which goes straight to CalHFA. And if they qualify as a buyer, not necessarily qualify for the loan yet, but as a first-time home buyer, first-generation home buyer, they'll get some type of a certificate, and that certificate will get emailed back to them, and they'll have a period of time that they can go and hunt for a house. So that's a key thing. Like I said last time, all this money was gone in 9 days because it was based on being approved and having a application. This time they're going to let you pre-qualify your borrower, give them a certificate that says you have 30 days, I don't know how long it'll be, 30, 60 days to go find your property, get yourself pre-approved, and then submit the loan back for final approval. So that's the piece that allows us to pre-qualify our borrowers. I think we'll probably see that in February because it looks like they're targeting this March, April for this program. So as soon as I have that document and information, I will update you guys. All right. Any questions? I'll answer the chat questions and then I got to go do some other stuff, guys. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Thanks a lot. That was good info. So I'm going to share my screen.